Okay, so welcome to Orthodoxy 201. Today's topic, as I've sent out in the email, is the true faith. So we'll look at these topics, not all tonight, but over the next number of weeks. And we'll begin with the question, what is truth? This is Pontius Pilate presenting the Lord to the people after he has that dialogue with Christ, in which he raises that question, what is truth? So if I could ask maybe for a volunteer to read this first slide. Marion?
Me. The truth on trial. I have spoken openly to the world, Jesus answered. I always taught in the synagogues and at the temple, where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why are you asking me? Ask those who heard my message. Surely they know what I said. Jesus said to Pilate, for this reason I was born and have come into the world to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice. Pilate said to him, what is truth? John 18:37-38.
Thank you, Marion. This question, what is truth, has been asked and posed by mankind since the beginning until today, and will be posed until the Lord comes back and reveals himself fully and perfectly. And everyone will see the truth face to face, because the truth is personal, right? God is the truth, and he reveals himself in Jesus Christ. We know the words Lord's, the words of the Lord, I should say, who on many occasions gave teaching that no one had ever given before, with an authority that no one ever had. And yet at the same time, in great humility, references his Father as the source of his teaching. He says, my doctrine is not mine, but his who sent me. If anyone seeks to do his will, he shall know concerning the doctrine, whether it is from God, or whether I speak on my own authority. He who speaks from himself seeks his own glory, but he who seeks the glory of the one who sent him is true, and no unrighteousness is in him. I am the way, the truth, and the life. If you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And this is eternal life, that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. So in this collection of verses from the Gospel of St. John, we see the Lord revealing the union between truth and life. The union between truth, life, himself, and his Father. He's speaking about these things and speaking about the mystery of the Holy Trinity, who also includes, of course, the Spirit of truth, who he will send from the Father. He's speaking about these things to his disciples so that they might not only know the truth, but also might abide in that truth. They might live by that truth. Now, this teaching of the Lord is presented here in the Gospel of St. John in its most lofty form. And the realization of these truths of Christ would only come, though, for the disciples when the Spirit of truth is given, because it's the Spirit of truth that will bring them into all truth, into the fullness of truth. So the revelation is from the Father through the Son, and it's communicated in the Holy Spirit. This is the one triune God, the true God, who is the truth and who shares his life with us. Now, stepping back a little bit from our Christian theology and entering into the realm of just human thought and philosophy, we should look at the study of knowledge, right? Epistemology is just that. It's the study of knowledge, the theory of knowledge. And we should talk about this because if we're going to have an intellectual conversation with somebody, a conversation that leads to truth, we have to understand the discipline of how communication works. We have to understand a little bit of philosophy, perhaps, but we have to, be able to engage with people where they're at. And some are Christians, and you could already, jump into doctrinal matters, but others are not. But all people, Christian or not, are reasoning people. Everybody has been gifted with intelligence by God, and everybody appreciates to some varying degrees, the importance of logic, rationality, reason, right? And these are the basis of all intellectual disciplines. The study of epistemology is the study of knowledge and how we might pursue that knowledge and come to understanding. So can I ask for somebody to volunteer to read this slide for us, please? Georgianne?
There we go. Sorry about that. Okay. Epistemology. Epistemology is the branch of philosophy concerned with the nature, scope, sources, and validity of knowledge. It explores questions about what knowledge is, how it is acquired, and how we can differentiate between knowledge and mere belief. Epistemology investigates the nature of truth, justification, evidence, skepticism, and the limits of human understanding. The term is derived from the Greek episteme, knowledge, and logos, reason. And accordingly, the field is sometimes referred to as the theory of knowledge.
Thank you, Georgianne. So you'll notice in the diagram some things that we're all familiar with, right? Senses, reason, intuition, and revelation. Revelation touches upon all of those capabilities that the human being has been gifted with. And if you look at the kind of flow of the diagram, things begin with the senses, right? We observe things, they come into our mind, we reason with them, and after processing things reasonably, we develop a certain intuition, and then we rinse and repeat. We begin that cycle again. And all of that is the process of coming to knowledge. And knowledge is revealed to us by God. God is the creator of all things, including the human person, whom he has called to come to knowledge. And not just knowledge of mundane matters, but knowledge, of course, of himself. And the revelation that God gives is not just natural or not just material or even just spiritual, it's divine revelation. It's a revelation of who he is as creator, as redeemer, as the life of the age to come. All of this is being poured out to us through our senses, through our reason, and through our intuition. And again, this is a repetitive process. So we continually go through this all the time, not once a day, not once an hour, but all the time. Every moment, every second, we're continually processing, continually learning, and hopefully we're continually growing in the knowledge of who God is. And if there are any questions, just stop me. So moving on, since we've looked at epistemology and its discipline, let's talk a little bit about the details here. So belief, knowledge, and justification. These are terms that are used within this realm of thought, and they have kind of definitions which are important for us to look at. So can I ask for a volunteer to take this slide? Matthew?
Belief is the acceptance that something is true or exists. It's a mental state wherein an individual holds a proposition to be true or likely true. Beliefs can range from mundane, everyday beliefs, the sun will rise tomorrow, to deeply held convictions, as in, I exist. Justification refers to the reasons, evidence, or rational grounds that support or provide warrant for holding a belief. Justification is crucial because it distinguishes mere opinion from knowledge. A belief is justified when there are good reasons or evidence to support it. Knowledge typically requires more than just belief. It also involves truth and justification. In the traditional analysis, knowledge is defined as justified true belief, the JTB account. This means that for a belief to qualify as knowledge, it must be justified, supported by evidence or reasons, true, corresponding to reality, and believed by the knower.
Thank you, Matthew. So many times when we think about belief, and in the context even of our Christian belief, people kind of will assume of the Christian that it's something not based in evidence, not something that is substantial, not something that's justified. And there can be certainly beliefs that do not fall within that category. However, the Christian faith is different from all other beliefs, because the Christian faith is not only justifiable, but it's also true. The Christian faith is true knowledge. Now, that we take as a matter of our doctrine. However, that is also something that people can themselves become convinced of. And part of the job of the Christian is to make a rational, justifiable case for why we believe what we do believe, right? And present that knowledge to others so that they might acquire it for themselves. But it's important, again, to define these things in such a manner, because we have to see the overlap. The overlap is extremely important. I don't know if you can see that diagram well enough, but for instance, if you have a belief that is not overlapping with the truth or something that is justified, that's a false belief. Right? Beliefs that are justified, meaning that you have good reason to believe it, but they are not true, that's also a false belief. Right? So the final option of belief that would be problematic would be a belief that is true, but not justified. Now, what could be an example of that? That would be something that you might believe, and it might be true, but you can't make a case for it. You can't present it as something that's justifiable. And if that's the situation for the Christian, we're in trouble, right? Because we have to be willing and able to give the reason for the hope that is within us. Right? We have to always be really ready to give witness, to give account, and to do it in a way that is rational, well presented, well thought out, and could then lead others to come to the acceptance of that same knowledge that we have acquired for ourselves. So truth, belief, and this idea of this knowledge being justified are kind of key terms to look at as we begin. Any thoughts or questions on that? Is that making sense?
Could I just point out something that I see?
Sure.
So I just took a course actually in critical thinking, which kind of touches on, I guess, beliefs. So, for example, the sun will rise tomorrow, or I exist. So these are they're inductive propositions. So they're saying, you know, it's like it's written, likely to be true. It's probably true. So, you know, before all this stuff, these are very like simple propositions. But if someone would say like the sun will rise tomorrow because for my whole life, I've seen the sun rise every day, you know, then they would have kind of like a premise to kind of lead to the conclusion to make people, you know, kind of think, okay, you know, I've seen that too, and kind of join in. I just wanted
Yeah, that's a good
point that
example.
out, and that's kind of what you're saying too, that people need to have like premises for their, you know, they call it arguments today. It's not an argument, it's just kind of like a dialogue, or, you know,
Yeah,
trying
there are
to,
reasons
yeah,
why we believe certain things, and those reasons can be rather convincing. So much so that, you know, not only do we believe them, but others as well. So that's the case of the sun rising, right? But it's also the case of other more spiritual things, things pertaining to the faith. So let's move on. Okay, now let's look at two different schools of thought. Um, Anyone want to take this slide? Empiricism and rationalism. Suzanne?
Empiricism. Empiricists assert that knowledge comes primarily from sensory experience, observation, and experimentation. According to this view, the mind at birth is a blank slate, tabula rasa, and all knowledge is derived from experience. Prominent empiricists include John Locke, George Berkeley, and David Hume. Locke, for instance, argued that the mind begins as a blank slate upon which sensory experiences write knowledge. Rationalism. This perspective holds that knowledge is primarily gained through reasoning, intuition, and innate ideas. Rationalists argue that certain truths exist independently of sensory experience, and that reason is the chief source of knowledge. Thinkers like René Descartes, Baruch Spinoza, and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz were notable rationalists. Descartes, for instance, famously asserted, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, suggesting that self-evident truths can be discovered through introspection and reason rather than sensory experience.
Thank you, Suzanne. So these two philosophical approaches are kind of opposites of one another, right? Empiricism and rationalism, one deals more with those things that are, let's say, tangible and concrete, that can be observed and weighed out and tested with the physical senses and instrumentation. And then the other, rationalism, deals more with those ideas or concepts, the kind of truths, if you will, behind the world, the invisible truths. These are, you know, more dealing with the immaterial world. So these two schools of thought are actually, you know, opposites of one another, but they should be considered to be complements of one another, right? Because for we who are Christians, we don't believe that, you know, the physical world is all there is, or the spiritual world is all that there is, but the two together were created by God. And both have their truths and have their particular disciplines. What happens though if you consider yourself so much so an empiricist that you reject rationalism, or a rationalist that you reject empiricism? What would be the result of that? Well, let's take a look. So you'd end up with these other two kind of extremes, right? Materialism and idealism. Can I ask someone to take this next section? Okay, I could take this one. Oh, Lisa Nancy, did you want to? Okay, I'll take it. Materialism holds that the physical world, including matter and energy, is the fundamental reality. And everything, including consciousness and mental phenomena, can ultimately be explained in terms of material components and physical processes. Idealism argues the exact opposite of materialism, that the foundation of reality consists only of what is mental, such as the mind, unlike the physical brain, spirit, reason, and will. Both materialists and idealists are one-dimensional thinkers. And that's the reason for the flat earth graphic, right? Those who believe in the flat earth are missing a dimension, right? There's something not complete in their worldview. And that's the same for those who are materialists and idealists. This is when you take those two disciplines of empiricism and rationalism to their extremes, right? And they have polarized themselves so much that they create a worldview that isn't consistent with reality anymore. So what would we say about this as Orthodox Christians, but that we are both and people, right? Sometimes you hear, that it's faith or works, right? Or it's, science or religion. We don't have that kind of dichotomy. We don't have that opposition. We accept both. So we can take the benefits of empiricism and rationalism and see them as disciplines that are useful and helpful and complementary to understanding the universe, which itself points to the creator of the universe. So we are not single-dimensional thinkers, right? And we're both and, if you want to think about the way that we approach these questions. So since we're asking, about the nature of knowledge, it's good to talk about, the limitations that we have with regard to certainty. So I pose these questions. What is real? Can anyone be 100% certain about anything? And if absolute certainty is not possible, what does one rely on? So first, can anyone be 100% certain about anything? Anyone want to take a chance at getting that question correct or wrong?
No.
I think in terms of like material things and life on Earth, I think it's 100% certain that someday I'm gonna die and leave this earth.
Well, that may be a strongly held belief that you have, but can you be 100% certain about it?
You can be certain that you're gonna die.
Can you? How would you
100%.
How would you be 100% certain?
Because everybody before me died. I know about resurrection of Jesus only.
Okay. That's a very good answer. When we think about that initial point of believing that the sun will rise tomorrow, we have good reason to believe that it will. We have good reason to believe that we will die. However, can we be 100% certain? That's the question. So if you look at the images to the right of this slide, you'll see that they're all from The Matrix, right? Has anyone seen The Matrix?
Yes.
Okay. Some of you have, maybe some of you haven't. So anyway, in The Matrix, it's talking about a world that's vastly different than our own. A world in which human beings are plugged into a central computer, and they live plugged into this computer in an imaginary world, a virtual world, right? And all of their relationships that they think they have, their professions, what they eat, what they drink, everything that they do, it all happens in this virtual world. And they are 100% convinced that it's real. Is it possible? And I'm not suggesting that this is the case, right? I think we have a lot of reasons not to think this is the case. But is it possible that we ourselves are in the Matrix?
But we can think about this about everything. And right now, a lot of people confused who they are. They're not certain what their gender is. But if you always leave that maybe, you can be certain about anything. But if you're certain about something, leave it with the faith that you're going to die, because proof showing that every person before me died, except Jesus, of course. So you have a proof that it certainly will happen to you. Certainly.
What if all of that is part of the Matrix?
I think so. What I mean, I'm kind of trying to read between the lines here. It's kind of like, all the great philosophers of Greece, like Plato, and you'd always ask why and always question everything. Like, what is truth? Like he would just question everything. So, I mean, that seems kind of like, with the knowledge that we have, from the Orthodox Church, kind of like a rabbit hole that, maybe someone wants to go down when they're like a young kid and question everything. But like for me, I mean, I'm maybe not 100% certain about anything, but through faith and experience, the certainty of someone could definitely grow, I think.
Yeah, and what I want to submit to everyone is that no one can be 100% certain about anything. It's impossible. However, we can have justified, reasonable belief about things, right? And every single person's worldview is a belief. It is not a certainty. A lot of times Christians get put in the camp of they're the believers. They have their own, faith about this or that. Everybody has a certain belief, a certain measure of faith about things. So, I'll give you an example. How many of you have been to Europe?
I've been to Europe. Mm-hmm.
Those of you who have been to Europe have a higher level of justification than those of us who haven't been. I haven't been. I mean, a flyover, it doesn't really count. So I haven't been there. So I believe that Europe exists because other people have been there, right? At least I've seen pictures, they tell me about it and all that. I believe that that's the case, but I've never been there. Even if I was there, who's to say I wasn't dreaming? Who's to say, that I don't have a mental illness where I was imagining things? Many times we think that it's only people who are schizophrenic or who have, mental disabilities are living in a world that is not real. All of us are living in a world that in our own perception is not real. It's somewhat inaccurate, right? We don't have certainty about things. We don't have the fullness of knowledge about things. We have our perceptions, and we do the best we can. And we try to be rational. We try to have justified beliefs, but all of it really is a matter of faith. I remember I had a conversation with somebody who struggles with schizophrenia, and they were telling me that, you know, they don't know what voices are real and what voices are not. They see people, and sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not. And they don't have a handle on things. Now that's an extreme, right? But we all don't have a handle on lots of things. You know, we might think so-and-so's mad at us or so-and-so hates us, but maybe so-and-so's just busy with something else going on in their life, right? And we can get caught up in our own heads, and we can, you know, try as best we can to kind of sort things out and rationally come to kind of a conclusion that we hope is going to be accurate. But to what degree is it actually the case? And that's, you know, going to be something that's never going to be 100%. It's always going to be something that is uncertain. So we do the best that we can. And there are strategies. Question number 2 is, you know, if absolute certainty is not possible, what does one rely on? And we do need to rely on it, right? So we have to have some kind of bearing. We have to be tethered to something. So let's continue. I'll explain the Jim Carrey reference in a moment. But can someone take this slide? Matthew?
Navigating uncertainty involves weighing evidence, probabilities, expertise, and practical considerations to arrive at beliefs or decisions that are reasonable and justifiable given the limitations of human knowledge. Evidence and reasoning, we rely on evidence from our senses, experiences, and scientific observations to form beliefs and make decisions. Reasoning allows us to interpret this evidence and draw conclusions, though it's always subject to potential flaws. Probability and likelihood. We assess the probability or likelihood of events based on available evidence and past experiences. While we might not be absolutely certain, we can still make informed judgments about the likelihood of certain outcomes. Consensus and expertise. We often defer to the expertise of others or the consensus of a community, such as trusting the conclusions of scientists, doctors, or other specialists in their respective fields. While this doesn't guarantee absolute certainty, it can provide a reliable basis for belief. Practical considerations. In many situations, we rely on practical considerations and risk assessments. We might act on what seems most reasonable or beneficial given the available information. Intuition and gut feeling. While relying on intuition can be influenced by unconscious biases or emotions, it can also be a valuable tool for quick decision-making in certain situations.
Thank you, Matt. So, lacking complete certainty, we try to grab onto that which we can to stabilize ourselves, to have a worldview that is rational and intelligent. And we use various different means to accomplish that. So this is a list of some of those things, and we all make use of them. And this isn't just in the realm of, let's say, religion, but it's in the realm of every other aspect of human life. You know, medicine, the sciences, sports, every kind of interaction that we have with other people, it's all influenced by these things, because we, in and of ourselves, are not able to perceive things 100% accurate. and have 100% certainty. So we have to reach out. We have to rely on others. And there's a certain measure of trust there, a certain measure of faith in the community, in the world in which we abide, for those who are believers, in the Lord himself, the creator of all things. But for those who are not believers, those who don't have faith in God, those who might be atheists or agnostics, they also have a worldview, right? They're also still trying to process things as best they can because they don't have 100% certainty. The agnostic obviously doesn't, right? Because they, by definition, don't know. The atheist, though, does claim that there is no God, right? And where's the certainty? Where's the evidence for that? Many times the onus is tried to be put on the Christian or the believer, the theist, to say, what's your evidence for there being a God? Well, what's the evidence for there not being a God? That a case has to be made on both sides, and whichever case is more convincing, more rational, more justifiable, should presumably carry the day, right? And that's a challenge, though, for us, because if we're in that arena of debate, we have to be equipped to be able to debate, to have these conversations, and to do it in a way that can not only maintain our own faith, but also can help somebody else come to faith, come to the realizations that our forefathers have come to themselves when they passed down the faith to us. But all of this we're dealing with probabilities. And here's the Jim Carrey reference. So what's the movie that this is referencing?
Dumb and Dumber.
Dumb and Dumber. Yeah, and then there's a sequel. I think it's like Dumb and Dumberer or something like that. Anyway, so in the movie, this guy, he's interested in this beautiful woman, and he comes up and he asks her, so what's like the probability of a guy like me and a girl like you, getting together and falling in love and all that stuff? And her response to him is 1 in a million. So he's thinking to himself, because this is, again, not an intelligent man. He's thinking to himself, oh, I've got a chance, right? So you're telling me there's a chance. And many times, people believe things that are unlikely, that are the odds of them being true are actually less than 1 in a million. And what I'd like to do in this class is look at some of those things with regard to atheism or with regard to naturalism, and kind of expose the highly improbable nature of these things that are so improbable they tend towards being really categorized as impossible. Now that's a big claim to make. However, I believe that there's evidence that can back that up, and that'll be part of the presentation, in the class. But everything is a matter of probabilities. Everything is a matter of faith and belief for every single person. There's not one person outside of the members of the Holy Trinity, right, who are lacking absolute certainty. That is, if you will, a divine quality. Okay, questions on any of this?
Comment, Father John?
Yes.
A couple of people mentioned before that there's a certainty that they'll die because they've seen other people die before, and people age and they die. But death is not a certainty. The scripture tells us that when our Lord comes back, there'll be those that are still alive, and that they'll be changed in a twinkling of an eye. So that's not defined as death. It's defined as going from corruptibility to incorruptibility. So there's no guarantee that each and every one of us will die. If the end of the world comes, it comes. So
absolutely. Yeah, and it's the same for paying your taxes too, right? That's the other thing that you can't avoid, people say. But as Father James says, the Lord can come back at any time. And those things that we take for granted, even getting up tomorrow, living another day, might not be there for us. Right? We should not have a false certainty that tomorrow will be there for us. It may not. So we have to maximize the present moment, right? That's why the message of the gospel is that today is the day of salvation. Now it's at hand, right? We have to seize the present moment and not procrastinate, not push off to tomorrow the things that are super essential, the things that are for our eternal life. Okay, so we concluded the first section, what is truth? I'd like to get into perception, if I may. So shall we continue? And this will build upon what we've just covered. So to move us along, I'll read this myself. It was Aristotle who first came up with the 5 categories of the senses, or more formally, sensory modalities: vision, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. But that was not the whole story. We certainly have more than 5, and depending on how we slice and dice the different categories, we might have as many as 53. Okay, I bet nobody, I'm almost 100% certain that nobody can name the 53 different senses that we have, right? Almost 100% certain. It could be done. Some of you are probably on Google now looking up that list. So, but the idea is, that we have a lot of ability to receive information, data from the created order, right? And that all comes into us, and it has to be processed. Okay. Well, let's talk about some things that don't come in through the physical senses. Do you believe in love? Not everything can be observed by the physical senses, even with the aid of scientific instrumentation. Love, while deeply experienced and profoundly influential in human life, cannot be found under a microscope because it's not a physical substance or phenomenon that can be observed or measured in the same way as biological entities or chemical reactions. While love may not be observable under a microscope, its impact on human behavior, relationships, and well-being is undeniable. Understanding love often requires interdisciplinary approaches that integrate insights from psychology, neuroscience, sociology, anthropology, philosophy, and theology, among other fields. Right, so if you are an empiricist at heart in an extreme way, right? If you're a materialist, you don't really have room for love as far as something beyond that which is just physical chemical reactions, right? And of course, those who do believe in love also believe in the physical manifestation of that, right? That the way the heart pitter-patters, or the way the mind works, right? Or the way the body functions, all of that is tied to love, right? But love is something that is more than something that is material. Love is something that is also spiritual or immaterial. And we know that there are lots of non-physical realities. So emotions and feelings are observable through their effects on behavior, facial expressions, vocalization, and physiological responses. Thoughts and mental states are observable through verbal reports, written communication, brain imaging techniques, and behavioral indicators. Concepts and ideas such as theories, mathematical principles, and philosophical ideas can be observed indirectly through their expression in language, symbols, and behavior. Social constructs such as norms, values, institutions, and cultural practices are observable through their manifestation in social interactions, behaviors, and cultural artifacts. spiritual and metaphysical beliefs, including experiences and practices related to spirituality, religion, and metaphysics, involve non-physical aspects of human existence that are often considered beyond the realm of empirical observation, yet the effects themselves are often very tangible. Right? So there are so many things that exist in our world that cannot be picked up by the physical senses or by any types of instrumentation, no matter how much technology advances and makes progress. There are certain things that will not be able to be picked up and read and measured because they are themselves immaterial. So, any ideas of some of those things that truly exist that do not fall in the realm of physical things? Some of those are on that little diagram there. And by the way, things that do exist immaterially, they can have, and in just about every case do have, effects on the physical world. Right? We're not dualists. We're not separatists. That there's interaction between the physical and the spiritual, between the material and the immaterial. But these certainly are as real and tangible as, a rock or a plant, right? The experience of all different types of emotions is very real. Mathematics, very real, right? And if you're talking about, by the way, things that get close to provable in the realm of logic and mathematics and other certain disciplines in science, you have kind of greater clarity and a higher level of precision and also a greater, even almost certainty about some of these truths, right? Has anyone studied logic? Okay, how about mathematics at a high level? So there are certain things, in logic and in mathematics that can be given as a proof, right? Something that you could walk through step by step by step, and it all lines up and it all makes perfect sense, and it's provable, it's definite. Things of the other sciences, whether it be biology or botany, they're not quite the same level of precision and certainty that you would have in mathematics or logic, for instance. Anyway, we can look at some of that if you really want to, but there are these non-physical realities that are, if you excuse the expression, as tangible and concrete as those things that are part of the physical world. Right? They're as real.
So mathematics, so is that a 100% certainty?
Well, the whole question of certainty isn't so much about the discipline as it is about the person who engages in the discipline, right? The certainty that we have is always going to be limited because we're human beings, right? There are certain things, like for instance, we might believe that a triangle exists or a circle exists. Well, that might just be in our imagination. Or other types of things that we could prove. Well, maybe we can prove them in the sense of being able to convince others and spell that out in as logical a way as possible. Yet it could also be just something that it is something that we've made a mistake on. And there have been cases where people have tried to prove certain things and then later come to the realization that actually they were incorrect. That's the nature of science. But with mathematics, it's more stable than the other forms of science. But the person who's conducting and doing the work will always be limited. And because of that limited capacity, there's always the potentiality for someone to not understand things fully. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so there could be some high level of certainty in the system that was developed for people to follow that's very accurate. And the most accurate system that humans have probably is mathematics. Like from a material standpoint, and what humans created. So yeah, that makes sense.
So now this is looking at the human person, right? Who, as we know from our Christian anthropology, is psychosomatic, right? What does it mean to be psychosomatic? Psycho isn't like crazy, right?
Yeah.
Psychopsyche, it's like the soul, right? That we have a soul, and soma is the body. So we're soul and body. So we have both the physical senses, the 50, whatever it was, right? And then we also have non-physical senses. And this is a chart that kind of indicates some of these things. So under the category of the mind, execution, efficiency, analysis, accuracy. Under the heart, conviction, authenticity, harmony, connectedness. Right under the soul, insight, meanings, exploration, possibilities. And these all have intersection points with each other. There's overlap. So that's what this chart is showing. So for instance, overlapping between the mind and the body would be that which is in the kind of the ST category. And if you're looking at the body, the SE, the experiencing, right, is also kind of close to the mind, because when we experience something through our sensory function, it also is connected to the mind, right? When we're thinking of things mentally and we're structuring, that's the TE, it kind of tends towards the ordering of the soul, which gives us insight and meaning and exploration, right? So all of this, all of these non-physical senses are interconnected with one another, right? They're interconnected with the physical senses, and then the mind, the soul, and the heart are also interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's an interesting diagram, right?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, here's another one. And this is where we're going to start to transition into our next topic. But if I can, there's 2 more slides here, and maybe we'll finish them today and we'll get to the next stuff tomorrow, or next week, I should say. So has anyone ever heard of the DIKW model?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a way that we can make progression from data to information to knowledge and to wisdom. So we kind of know this, even if you haven't seen the chart, we know that how this kind of operates, right? Data is just, sensory types of things, observations that come in to us, that collectively can be kind of structured into information, right? And that information, when processed, reveals patterns, and it gives us knowledge about a particular subject. And when we have knowledge about subjects, we understand the principles behind them and how they're structured and how they can be implemented, and use that knowledge could be used in a way for the good, right? And that's wisdom. So there's a natural progression, and it's a progression, really from the physical to the non-physical, right? The material to the immaterial. Now, this lays the framework, the groundwork, this phenomenon, I should say, right? This lays the groundwork and the framework for philosophy, right? And also, this is what is behind theology as well, right? Where we're moving from the creation to the creator, right? That God has created the world and put us in it so that he might create an opportunity for us to come to the knowledge of him. So there's a progression from the lesser to the greater. Okay, the DIKW model represents the relationships between data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. Each building block is a step towards a higher level. First comes data, then information, next is knowledge, and finally comes wisdom. Many authors think that the idea of the DIKW relationship originated from two lines in the poem Choruses by T.S. Eliot that appeared in the pageant play The Rock in 1934. And this is the quote: "Where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge we have lost in information?" Right? And don't we experience that today? I mean, where we're flooded with so much information, and yet we don't have too much knowledge. And if we have knowledge, do we know how to apply that? Do we have the virtuous attitude and disposition to use that knowledge wisely? There are many questions in our age of technology and advancement that, I think, expose the fact that we are not doing this very well. I think it was, who was it that mentioned about, we don't even know the gender of children anymore. Is it possible in our day of science that we don't know the gender of children? And that, we use the capabilities that science affords us in a way that is the exact opposite of wisdom to cause harm to others? How's that happening? It's because we are not functioning in the proper way. We don't have this hierarchy in place. We're not making an ascent to that which is for the good. So we can be, immersed in our data and in our information, and we could be lacking knowledge and wisdom. And in that way, we regress rather than make progress. So continuing with this DIKW model, there's two other ways to present it. Two ways to present it. One was that kind of the chart that we just looked at, and then the other is to look at pyramids. So data, information, knowledge, wisdom, all leading up to the top, right? And we think of data, who, what, where, right? Knowledge is more of how. Wisdom has to deal with why, right? There's a progression in our thought. And then there's also a progression from the past, hopefully, to the future, right? So we gather the data, we connect it, and we, in information, it forms knowledge, and that knowledge hopefully leads towards wisdom, and that allows us to create a better future, right? So we research and absorb, we interact, and we reflect. This is the process of ascent, right? An intellectual ascent, a spiritual ascent, and then after we repeat the process again. Going back to that first slide where we looked at the senses, right? And then after the senses, we rationally process that. We begin to have some kind of intuition, right? Which is the emergence, if you will, of wisdom. All of that has been given to us, by God as part of his revelation to us. Everyone following?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, have you memorized these charts?
Yep.
Okay. So that
I screenshotted the charts so that I memorized them.
Okay, good. So next we'll move on to metaphysics and philosophy. I do want to apologize. I was imagining that some people probably came to this class looking for just straight theology, right? And didn't want to get into all of this other stuff. Unfortunately, I don't think we can do that. And I don't think we can do it for a number of reasons. One, we will not understand the theology in its fullness without processing through these things, through these other disciplines, which are less than theology, without a question, but which are building blocks and are supportive, right? It's part of our training. Many of the great fathers, they went to school. They studied the classics, rhetoric, the sciences of the day. They studied logic and all of these disciplines that we might consider to be philosophical, right, or metaphysical. They immerse themselves in these things, not because they found eternal life in them, but they saw these things as stepping stones and building blocks to the development of the mind, so that the mind could, through the grace of God, be enlightened much further. I remember the case of St. Gregory Palamas, who he was raised by his parents in two primary ways. One is he was given the highest education possible, and two, he was exposed to monastics who came from the Holy Mountain and other places, and he had this kind of dual upbringing, this dual training. And it was even said, by the way, that of his secular studies, that his teacher thought that St. Gregory reminded him of Aristotle, except for there was one difference. St. Gregory was better than Aristotle, right? And what St. Gregory did is, after completing his studies, he left the world and went to the monastery, and he prayed a very specific prayer. He prayed that God would enlighten his darkness, right? This was a guy who was more brilliant than Aristotle and considered himself to be abiding in darkness, right? All of the preparation that he had done was incomplete because he lacked what is only found in the divine nature. And the human being is not meant to be on his own. The human being is not complete without God. So when we look at these things, the nature of knowledge or philosophy, metaphysics, and the like, this is part of, you could put in the realm, let's say, of humanism. However, it can be preparatory towards higher things, the seeking of the things of God. And also, the knowledge of these things, in addition to helping us in our own advancement, will help us in interacting with other people who are immersed in this, right? This is where they live. If you ever, debate with people about God and about, the nature of existence and things like that, they're very knowledgeable about philosophy and metaphysics. And we do well to be educated on it, at least to some degree, so that we can interact. But our job is, of course, to bring people further. And I think that you'll enjoy perhaps more, not next time, but the time after, when we get into the Logos and Revelation and then Orthodoxy and Holy Tradition. But again, it's just setting a kind of a framework for our further studies.
But don't you think that's because they went so much deep in psychology, they stopped believing in God? I'm sorry, but that question like that, because all these people super smart, they all of a sudden stop believing in God. The super smart one who get in all this depth of psychology of a human mind, trying to uncover human mind. But the result is they fall so far away from God, they feel themselves a little too high.
She's like,
yeah, I think that initially, when someone pursues these disciplines in a humanistic way, right, in a way that's not in reference to God, they feel like they're acquiring knowledge. They feel like they're acquiring understanding. And because of that, they feel kind of self-sufficiency, and egotism. And
Pride.
in that pride, they don't seek God. However, what happens is, as they continue, they realize that these disciplines are dead-ended, that the knowledge that they think that they're acquiring is actually more ignorance than knowledge. And it humbles people when they try to go down an avenue and they spend their whole life going down that avenue and then realize it's a dead end. And we'll see when we look at this section on philosophy, that's largely what happens with some of the greatest minds, in the history of the world. The great philosophers realized, Socrates is a great example, that he realized he was the wisest man in Athens because he came to realize that he knew nothing. That's what made him the wisest man, that he knew nothing. So
I remember his expression, yeah. I mean, he knows more.
Melina, do you have a question or a comment?
I have both.
Yeah, please.
First of all, I want to thank Father John for such a very informative class, and if you can call it class, because although you said it's something we probably didn't expect, I think it's really helpful in understanding of our faith and beliefs. I was actually, who doesn't know me, I was raised in Soviet Union, where it was very strong atheistic idea, although most of the people probably were more agnostics versus atheists. But bringing back what Marina just said about philosophy, studying philosophy in college a lot, I found out that a lot of philosophers, especially fairly of modern history, they were very religious people, and their idea of philosophy was finding the truth about faith, and they didn't stop believing. Vice versa, it brought them to the fact that for our Christianity, that it's a true faith. And the first person who made me thinking was 90s, and I was taking classes of one professor of philosophy who was actually also historian, and being raised as atheist, being very like groomed in this atheist society, he shared with us without any. He even said, "I don't want anybody of you, my students, to think that I'm promoting Christianity," but he shared his experience and how he came through his studies, extremely intelligent, knowledgeable person who had PhD in philosophy and history, came to believe that Christianity exists and it has a lot of truth and support to what Christianity teaches. So that's what first thing that made me probably more seriously, because I am very logical person, and made me think that way. So I want to thank you, and I had the same experiences of what you just brought up during this class.
Thank you for the complimentary words, and then also for sharing that experience. Yeah, I would like to say, because I spoke about the limitations of philosophy. Philosophy is the love of wisdom. And, it is something that, can point to God. And as we look in the coming, classes at a little bit more at the great philosophical minds in history, we'll see how, God was actually enlightening them, and he was preparing them for the revelation that would come in Jesus Christ. So when people study philosophy now, it is a worthy discipline. It's like reading the Old Testament to understand better the New Testament, right? Philosophy does point to Christ, because Christ is, as the scriptures say, the wisdom, word, and power of God, right? So the philosophers, although they couldn't name who it is that they were seeking or what it is that they were seeking Christ. And as St. John says in the gospel, he's the true light that enlightens every man coming into the world. So if anyone comes to any kind of realization, any kind of knowledge, a belief that's justified and true, it's happening through the revelation of God. So when we look at metaphysics and we look at philosophy, those two next subjects, I want you to look at it in the sense that these are pointers to God too. It's not the same level as let's say theology, but it's nonetheless important. Any other thoughts or comments, questions?
Father John,
Yes.
I just wanted to know, are you planning on actually covering any of those, I guess you could say those, the ways in which logic and philosophy specifically point to God? Because I've heard a number of different, I guess you could say, arguments in favor of that. I'm curious if that's going to be part of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So like under metaphysics, there's a number of arguments for God that we'll look at, and they're good and they're solid, and they actually bring people to the faith. Right? So these are tools, that are at our disposal to interact with people. A lot of times, if somebody has a love of philosophy, but not an interest in theology, and you start to talk to them about the Gospels or the Scriptures or the lives of the saints, they're not going to listen to you. But if you can talk to them about a subject that they're very interested in, and you can present Christ in that, they can really have their interest piqued, and then they'll go beyond metaphysics or philosophy, and they'll be able to arrive at theology. But you have to meet people where they're at, and the arguments that are for God, they're reasonable, they're rational, right? They are convincing, and we as Christians should know them too. In addition to what we receive from our Christian tradition, in kind of its in its maybe more theological sense, we should also have at our disposal that which is from the philosophical tradition, which supports our Christian faith too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So any more questions or comments before we close tonight? Okay, shall we pray? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Shine on New Jerusalem, the glory of the Lord has shone. Exalt now, exalt, and be glad, O Zion. Be radiant, O pure Theotokos, in the resurrection of your Son. Christ is risen. Everybody, thank you and have a good night.
You too, Father. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You as well.